Hey everyone, welcome back to Flourishing with a Facial Difference. My name is Brooke, and today's episode is all about what I think parents should teach their children when they make comments about people who are born different. As always, before I get into this episode, I want to start off with something a little bit positive. It's okay to begin your story today. Those mistakes that you've made along the way are lessons, not failures. You were meant to get back up and find a way that resonates with you. There is no expiration date to reinventing yourself. So I almost had to skip this week's episode because I've been super busy this week. That doesn't happen very often, but this week I got some news at work, which is causing me to work a little bit longer at work, and I'm really excited for the change that's coming for me, and it's probably going to keep me a little bit more busy than usual. And if you didn't know this, I do actually have a second job. I work 2 days a week, which totals to about 8 hours a week, doing something else on the side that goes hand in hand with my full-time job. I do love having a second job. It's kind of like play money, like I can pretty much do whatever I want with that money that I make. It's super small. It's something that I can definitely quit if I need to, if I feel like I'm overwhelmed. So it is really nice to know that I can step away from it if I need to. Also, this week, I went to an amazing concert. I saw my absolute favorite artist, Lennon Stella, Wednesday, which, if you can tell that my voice is a little bit raspy, it's because I lost it from screaming and singing so loudly. So the day of the concert was actually a day that I usually record on, and somehow I was able to fit in time to record and edit and post. But this week has been absolutely crazy. It's been wild. But the thought of not uploading a podcast episode this week when I've been consistent for the past 7 or 8 weeks now just didn't really feel good to me. I'm very passionate about what I do with this podcast. And if I absolutely have to, then obviously I will postpone an episode, but it's just not something that I want to do right now. So let's go ahead and get on into the topic of this episode. Today, I really want to go into depth about my thoughts and my opinions on what I think a parent should say to their children who make comments about someone who was born different. And what I mean by that is children are the most honest of all the people in the world. They have absolutely no filter, and they will pretty much say anything that's on their mind. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that it's super important for children to be mindful of what they're saying and how they're saying it to certain people. I reached out to quite a few people that are in the facial difference community that are some of my really good friends that I've made along the way. And I'm excited to just kind of share some of their story. And they were able to contribute to this episode and kind of give me a little bit more content to work with, because I didn't think it was fair to go off of my experience and my experience alone, because that can be very biased. So I'm really glad that I was able to bring in a few more opinions. I want to share some of my experiences that I've had with children who have made rude comments to me about my facial difference, and the parent did nothing but watch. Now, again, these are my own experiences and my own personal opinions of how I think that a parent should have handled it, but I'm also not a parent. I do not have children, and I'm not really exposed to children that often, so I could be wrong of how I think that these situations should be handled, but I will go ahead and explain my personal opinion on how I think I would have handled the situation. I have definitely had children make comments about me all of my life. I'm 23 years old, and it probably happens to me about once a week. I'm not even exaggerating. It happens so much. And I think that goes for every person who has a facial difference. For some reason, even though facial differences are so much more common these days, I think children are just not taught how to handle it. So working in retail, I've definitely had several comments made by children while I'm ringing up the parents' items. One thing they always say is, "What happened to your eyes?" And my go-to is always, "Oh, I was just born different," or "Some people were just born differently." I never go into detail of what condition I have because I just don't think that they would understand. All they really need to know is that people are just born different. And not once has a parent ever stepped in and said, "You shouldn't say that," or apologized to this woman. No parent has ever stepped in and intervened. They kind of just let me handle it all on my own. And I just don't agree with that. Something that happened to me that I think about all the time is my boyfriend and I were invited to a party at one of his friends' house. There were quite a bit of people there, and it was like a family thing. It wasn't like a rager or anything. I think it was like to watch a game or a fight or something. I really don't remember what the occasion was for, but it was definitely something that children were at. I remember my boyfriend Joe and I were sitting on the couch and we were eating and we were watching TV. The living room was very tiny and there was so many people in there. There was quite a bit of people. It wasn't just him and I. And a little boy and his mom walked in. The little boy was probably about 7 to 8, maybe 9 years old. And he was definitely one of those loud and rowdy kids. But he walked in and he screamed, "What's wrong with her? Why does she look like that?" And everyone just kind of ignored him. No one said anything to him. No one looked up. No one looked at me. And I think that because he was ignored, he felt like maybe someone just didn't hear him. So he proceeded to say, "Mom, what happened to her? What's wrong with her? Why does she look like that?" I was absolutely mortified. I don't know why I was so embarrassed, because this does happen to me quite a bit, but I think it was just the fact that I was with my boyfriend and his friends, and I try really hard to fit in and pretend that I'm not different, and sometimes I do fully convince myself that I don't look different and that I look just like everybody else and that I'm completely fitting in, and then something like that happens, and it totally reminded me that I do look different and that sometimes I feel like I just don't belong. And I definitely lost my appetite. I was sitting there, my face was burning on fire. It was so red. I was so embarrassed, and I just wanted to go home. It completely ruined my night. I know that my boyfriend Joe did get really upset about it. He didn't say anything, but he was pretty upset. He will still talk about it to this day, that it was just so rude and so unfiltered. But what bothered me the most was not the kid, because again, kids are uneducated. They just don't know, and that's not their fault. I think that they're just not being educated on the fact that people are born different. Not everyone looks the same. What really bothered me was the parent completely ignored what he said. She didn't look embarrassed for her son. She didn't look sympathetic towards me. She just completely ignored it. She didn't correct him. She simply just kept filling up her plate with food. And that really bothered me. And so I just want to take this episode to talk a little bit about what a parent should do in that situation. Now, again, these are my opinions, and you don't have to think that my way is law, that what I say is how a parent should do things. But as someone who looks different and has to bear that, I think that it's important that I have a say in what a parent should teach their children as far as people who look different. I knew that I couldn't have been the only one who goes through this, so I reached out to a few of my friends who have facial differences, and I wanted to know if something like that ever happened to them and how they handled it. One of my good friends, Ariel, said that something very similar happened to her, and all she wanted the parent to do was acknowledge that her child had said something that offended her. I think that the way my friend Ariel said it is absolutely perfect, so I'm just going to read off what she sent to me. When a child makes a rude comment, the parent really should intervene. So I asked her what she thinks the parent should have said in a situation where a child is completely unfiltered. And she said, quote, "Kids model behavior that they see. Normalizing interactions with people who are different starts at home. So having the parent of someone who is staring turn an awkward situation into a simple say hello means a lot. It makes the kid staring know that there's nothing to be afraid of and that the person being stared at will feel less terrible." So I completely agree with Ariel. I think that it should be normal for people to have interactions with people who are different. I think it does start at home. And again, because I look different, I plan on teaching my children how to handle people who look different, how to interact with people who look different. My sisters, for example, they grew up around someone who looks different, and they do not at all treat other people who are different as if they are different. They don't stare at people, they don't make comments about people, and I think that has a lot to do with me being their sister. I briefly worked at a daycare, and none of the kids ever made any comments about me, and I think that was because I was around them so often. It takes a certain amount of exposure for children to fully accept someone who looks different. And I just feel like parents should really be teaching their children at home that there are people in the world who look different, and you very well could encounter one. So let's not make them feel as different as they look. Ariel has a twin sister, Alexandria, who I've become friends with as well, and I asked her the exact same question: has she ever experienced a child say something negatively about her and the parent witnessed and did nothing about it? And of course, she said yes. She said that she had a child comment about her eyes and asked what was wrong with her face, and the child's dad said absolutely nothing. She said that she had wished that he had said something. She wished that he had made the child apologize, and she was so humiliated. And I hate that for her. She said that she thinks that parents should force children to treat people with the same decency. Kids have a very big sense of entitlement. They want to know what's going on all the time. And I understand that. I think that's super important. And I think that's very important for child development to constantly want to learn and know more. But I think that children should also come to terms with the fact that you don't always need an explanation. So a child saying something like, "What's wrong with her?" they should learn that they don't have to know what's wrong with someone. They should just accept it and move on. And if they can't accept it, then don't say anything about it and just go on about your day. I definitely don't want to make this episode all about children who don't know how to keep their comments to themselves, because there are so many age groups that suffer the same problem. I have definitely had teenagers can be completely unfiltered and say, "What's wrong with you? Are you retarded? Why do you look like that?" So it's not just children. And because teenagers and adults' brains are already so developed, I don't actually have any advice or tips on what to do about that. But because children have so much more to learn, I think that they have hope. I do think that they have hope in changing the way that they look at people. I wish that I was brave enough to pull a parent aside and tell them that you really should expose your children to the fact that there are different people in the world. I am absolutely nowhere near ready to start having children, but I am so excited to start teaching my children how to accept people who are different. I can't wait to take my child in public where there's someone in a wheelchair, or someone who has a facial difference, or someone who has very badly burned skin, or someone who doesn't have an arm or a leg, anything at all. I can't wait to take my child out in public, have them be exposed to different kinds of people, and have them welcome them, have them be kind to them, and have them accept who they are. I do hope that one day that children will be very accepting and very kind to everyone they encounter. And if you're listening to this and you're a mom, if you're a dad, if you're a grandma, a grandpa, an aunt, an uncle, if you have any exposure at all to young children, please teach them that it's okay to accept people who look different. It's okay to be curious about what happened to someone, but it's not okay to feel entitled to the fact that you need to know what happened. And I bet you if you're kind to someone, they will be more than happy to share their story with you. Being kind can go such a long way. And that's pretty much all I have to say in this episode. Just be kind to everyone you meet. Teach children and be an example of what kindness looks like. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Flourishing with a Facial Difference. I'll see you guys next week.